All right, on the agenda tonight is looks like the first item on the agenda tonight is the 2024-25 school board goals. Superintendent Gross.
All right. Hi, David. I think first it would be good to ground the conversation in the strategic direction. So if you could pull up that wheel that's in your packet. And just as a reminder, this document came as a result of the synthesis of community input that included focus groups, community survey, staff at every site, students, parents, all of that. That was that big report that Ed and Laura put together. Yeah. And out of that came 6 strategic directions that are that you'll see in more kind of fleshed out form on the operational plan. But these are the 6 areas that we are focusing on as a strategy team. We shared this at that update that I gave to you in May. But these are the 6 things that, you know I might be one of whatever 500 and some that have these all memorized, but it's something that everybody needs to be familiar with or become familiar with as we talk about it more. But these are really the basis, and we've tried to tie everything we're doing back to those. So if we look at the 23-24 board goals or objectives, the first one had to do with the operational plan. We did that. That was completed, and I actually have an updated one in your packet now, just as a draft, some things that we need to adjust, and we can talk about that later. But that was completed. The student achievement goal is really the one where we fell short. We've had a lot of conversations with our strategy team about this, and we've been talking a lot about process goals at this point. This is more of an outcome goal, and there gets to be a place in our system where until we're addressing the systems, the processes we have in place, we've kind of squeezed as much blood out of the turnip in terms of those processes or systems. And for us right now, that the limiting factor at this point, we have a strong intervention system, but our core curriculum and core instruction is the barrier for our outcome achievement. So that 6% gain was aggressive. And I think for some folks, it became, the outcome became a distraction from what they actually needed to do to get there. So we're talking a lot more in terms of process this year. We're still going to obviously look at our data because that's important. That's one of the chief things on our scorecard, but our focus is going to be a lot more on process this year.
So Matt, what does that mean? Obviously we have the 6% on our 23-24. What does that mean going forward? Is it still going to be 6%? Are we to talk about 6%? Is it something different than that?
Yeah. So at the building level, for instance, we're going to be talking about implementation of wit and wisdom at a fidelity rate of 70% as measured by walkthroughs, building walkthroughs. So that's much more of a process, knowing that that curriculum is based on the science of reading, and that the outcome of it's going to influence scores rather than focusing on the scores themselves. So on the new goals, I talk about raising student achievement, but I didn't put a particular number down. And we can talk about that if we want to do that. 3, execute plans to stabilize the district finances through additional community support. That really was about the referendum. We executed a referendum and obviously we're unsuccessful, but in terms of maybe it's glass half full, it did create an opportunity for us to talk a lot about our financial needs. More people know about the challenges we're up against, and the inequities that exist between rural districts and metro districts, and for sure our situation here. So we did execute the referendum, but we're unsuccessful. 4, support the deepened implementation of the science of reading in all grade levels. In the spring of 2023, we identified a curriculum that aligns with the state's, I guess, recommendations, I'd almost say requirements, as well as a PD program through the University of Minnesota called Carry All. And so that professional development plan is in place for the fall. It's actually beginning a week from this. The leader training is actually tomorrow. So our principals will begin implementation training tomorrow, and then there'll be a teacher session shortly after that. So that's well on its way. One of the things that's very different about our approach moving forward, and I shared with our staff, our kind of strategy team and the principals, that our top strategic direction has to do with equitable education. That means that we need a guaranteed and viable curriculum that every kid is getting. And if that's happening, then the experience of a student in third grade in Cohasset should be the same as the experience of a third grader in Big Fork in terms of what their material. And that hasn't been the case.
Right.
There's been a very, very high degree of variability. And so the chart that I described was these two axes where we have high variability down one axis and high autonomy in the other. And when we have high autonomy, when people can do what they want, we're going to have a high degree of variability. And when we have a high degree of variability, there's no way we can have an equitable education. So our pacing guide for the fall is very, very specific, much more specific than what I think our staff are used to. For instance, you could look on that pacing guide and see on October 12th what lesson should be taught. All of them should be teaching the same thing on the same day. Now, like I said, that's a much higher degree of specificity than has ever happened here, and I'd say probably in most places. And there probably will be some questions about autonomy that I understand, but until we have that degree of specificity happening in our system, there's no way to diagnose what the problem really is if everybody's doing their own thing at their own pace. And I think evidence of the variability we have right now comes from classroom requests. People requesting a particular teacher for their child. And when you look at the subset of who's making those requests, it's very eye-opening. And if we have a low degree of variability, those requests shouldn't be there, because those children's experience should be the same no matter what school you're in.
Matt, do we have unit support on this?
The teachers actually, there is the English Language Arts Committee is the one that they've been designing the whole thing.
Sweet.
So they met last Monday, a week ago, to design the expectations. And so we have, again, this is new territory for us, but very, very clear expectations about what's going to get taught when, how that aligns with the pacing from Wit and Wisdom, the curriculum company. And again, that's really, the ELA committee is the one that said we need to do that.
Good.
So
I would think by going to grade level schools, that would be an advantage for everybody, right? Being in
Yeah.
the same, all the
You
second
bet.
graders being in the same, right? If they got a question,
Right.
talk to the counterpart.
Yeah, you're right. Previously, if you think about that from a teaching and learning standpoint, this side of the table would have been in one side of town teaching this, and that side of the table would have been in another. And now in the hallway, literally after school, there can be a conversation about that lesson today, because we all should have been doing lesson 28 or whatever.
So the accountability would be the walkthroughs?
Correct. So the accountability will be the walkthroughs, to be in classrooms looking for the implementation of Wit and Wisdom. Did I observe a language arts lesson, and are they in the place that they're supposed to be?
Do we have adequate resources to do for all classrooms to do the same thing at the same time?
As far as curriculum, yes. Yep. We spent what we needed to spend in order for all the teachers to have all the resources they needed.
Good.
I think one of the things that will be as challenging as anything is the accountability part.
Yep.
Because we're down, 3 principals. And that means that the capacity to be in those buildings, be in those rooms is down. So we talked about that. I've told the principals that my expectation is that they'll be getting some principal subs during the year. Every principal that we have has people in their building that are licensed to be principals or in a neighboring building. And it's good for that teacher to get out of the classroom and experience that too. But that's really the only way that we can guarantee that that principal is going to be able to unplug from the duties that they have. And in many cases now for our buildings, they might be solo to unplug enough to be able to get into rooms the way they need to. So that's also from the accountability standpoint going to be something that I'm talking about when I'm meeting with them monthly to talk about how many did you get done? What are you seeing? What trend are you seeing? So the 3 things that we're talking a lot about as in that admin group and with our strategy team is clarity, intentionality, and accountability. Are we clear about what we want? Is there a plan to actually get it done? And how are we going to know if we're doing it? So it'll be different.
Back to David's point in resources, obviously we're making a big shift change, right?
Mhm.
And back to accountability and student achievement and all that. Let's make sure we have the right amount of resources on the front end so that they can be successful going forward. If we cut ourselves short there, we're setting ourselves up for failure down the way. And I understand it's a budgetary thing, but we need to work through that to make sure whether it's a sub here or a sub there, let's do what we need to do so that it can be successful going forward. So there is a good buy-in and we don't create friction and just chaos, whatever on it. So
What's the typical duration of a walkthrough?
It's generally pretty short because they're in less than 15 minutes. They're in there to walk. They're in there to look for a particular thing. And what we talk about and one of the concerns that comes up is, well, you just weren't in my classroom when that was happening. And that's true sometimes. And the metaphor that I use is if David went on a family vacation to Arizona and your remember picture books when you have but if your book of pictures, if you think about each one of those being a walkthrough, if there wasn't one single picture of the Grand Canyon in there, it would be safe for me. It would be a reasonable conclusion of mine that you didn't go there. If on all these pages, there was not a single picture of the Grand Canyon. Now it's possible but it's more likely than not that you didn't go there. So if the purpose of walkthrough isn't about to be able to go, Mark Schroeder isn't this or that. It's just be as a building, we're not implementing with fidelity. It's an aggregated view. It's the whole book of pictures, not a page. So they're relatively short. They're looking for something very specific in nature. So another thing that we'll be doing, the curricular initiative is a K-8. That's also something that's relatively unique, that we have a literacy program that spans all the way up through 8th grade. Our high school teachers are excited because there's no break in the scope and sequence for them now. They can look at and go, well, we know exactly where these 8th graders are getting dropped off. There's no like, well, they went from this program to this program to this to that. They're excited about that. But since that is K-8, the high school staff isn't implementing carry-all. They're not implementing wit and wisdom. They're going to be focusing on instructional strategies based on explicit instruction is the name of the text from Anita Archer. And they're going to be working on opening a lesson. What are productive, effective ways to open a lesson? So the walkthroughs at the high school are going to be based on looking for those strategies in that area. So more on the approach, less on the content. The elementary, it'll be a little bit of both. And Jill's doing a great job. One of the things when we lost our teaching and learning director, teaching and learning obviously is turned up a dial. So Jill is really carrying the water when it comes to that elementary piece. Ryan is helping to carry the water at the secondary level, to kind of help keep things moving forward there.
So as a teacher, let's say it's second grade and they're teaching language arts and the kid doesn't get it.
Mhm.
And so day 1, day 2, the kid doesn't get it.
Mhm.
Day 3, the kid doesn't get it.
Mhm.
Where does a teacher fall in? Does a child get left behind? Or does remedial?
Well,
Yeah.
part of that's when you get into the tier 2 and 3.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Remediation.
There's definitely reteaching that has to happen with kids that aren't getting it the first time. And then if there are some learning challenges or learning gaps, I mean, we're still dealing with that through the system where, there are 8th grade kids who a few years ago didn't have a very solid year of instruction. So we're still dealing with COVID kids, and as much as I don't want to dwell on that, the research continues and the studies continue to show like it did make a big difference. And so we're still playing catch up from that. But there will be reteaching, and then that's where our intervention system comes in. But we're still, I mean, this fidelity piece is still a place where we have to improve so that we know it's not just about us saying that we were going to do this. Morton Gillingham's a great example. Like, we rolled out this really good, phonemic awareness component to our curriculum. It's only as good as the implementation fidelity. If we're not doing what we say we're going to do, it's not helping us. So part of what we're rolling out aren't just expectations relative to carry all our wit and wisdom, but it's also going back a little bit to OG and saying, hey, you can't forget that component of it, because if you're not knocking that out of the park in 1st and 2nd grade, we shouldn't be teaching OG in 3rd grade. And if we are, it's because we didn't do it. We didn't kind of hit it enough in 1st and 2nd grade. It's not, it's the reality. So we have to have that fidelity.
You said 2 key things in my mind, Matt, is intentionality and accountability, right? Setting those expectations. And obviously that's going to be a shift for the staff, but if we can get it all, getting those arrows going in the same direction, keep at it, it'll get easier as we go, right? I think it will, at least in my eyes.
Yeah.
It will. So I like it.
Then 5, support the deepened implementation of MTSS. That's something the district's committed to a lot of resources to, and it needs to continue to do that. That's something that we can't let off the gas pedal on. A part of that, like our next back to fidelity, a next part of that, and you'll see in the operational plan revision, I included some language in there because one of the things that we have to ensure is that our data gathering relative to that is happening the way that it needs to happen. So I mentioned in the green here, we had more staff adhere to the testing windows during 23-24. And as just kind of a quick reminder, we don't just wait until MCAs to find out how our kids are doing. We benchmark in the fall, we benchmark in the winter, we benchmark in the spring. And that data is going to come to you this year. I haven't shared that with you previously, but that data is, I mean, you've seen it as like Ryan or Jen maybe, but you're going to see it right after the benchmarking window's over and those assessments have been given out. We create these windows, and it's really important that those assessments happen in those windows, because if that window stretches out, the quality of that data goes down. Because all of a sudden this kid's been in school for 4 weeks longer taking the same assessment. And if these assessments are normed at all, they have to be relatively tight. So we had way more staff test in the window. And, you know, it's a typical implementation where we had some people jump on right away because they saw the importance. Some people, it was about compliance only. Some people had really good reasons, like testing at that time really disrupts my curriculum, you know, that I had this project or whatever. They're really good reasons, but it's one of those things where the whole is more important than an individual piece, right? Like the whole system needs this individual piece to fall in line a little bit. So some of the reasons are rational, but in terms of the greater good, but in terms of the greater good, they said here. So we're going to continue to keep our foot on that pedal too.
So Matt, going forward, just in regards to the testing, when we talk about everybody's gonna be doing the same lesson plan on day whatever, will we all be doing the testing the same day then?
They'll be all in a window. Yep. And the windows, we've had to adjust the window too, because we've made cuts in technology, which means we have less devices. It used to be that if all of us had to give an assessment, we could all do it at the same day, at the same time. Can't do that anymore because the three of us might be sharing a cart, so we have to figure out how we're going to do it. And you might be in the same situation. So, I mean, we're making all these things work still. Some of it, you know, as you'd expect, budget cuts affect how we're able to roll. And one of the ways it's affecting us is our ability to, you know, have these windows be as tight maybe as we'd want them. We have to make them a little bit longer, not too long, obviously, but a lot going on there. And, you know, even back to 4, we're talking about reading there, but it's the same thing with the science that we rolled out. You know, we still have to hammer on fidelity there, make sure that we're teaching STEM scopes when we need to be teaching STEM scopes in the junior high. That's another walkthrough item where it's like, okay, am I in here seeing that curriculum being used and that kind of thing. 6, deepen collaborative partnerships. I mean, we took a huge jump in that this last year. Activating on collaboration opportunities with NK and IS, taking on their business departments and HR duties. That was a big step. And so,
Is it all in place?
yes, yep, we are, yep, all of it is in place. We're operating fully, all of IS, we're operating fully all of NK.
So is that going okay?
Yeah, I mean, there's still some things we're working through, like what were the employee expectations previously? How do those employee or administrative expectations align with best practice? And as we operate that business or HR department, then which do we administer? Do we provide the same level of service that 318 employees expect or get? Or do we deploy the same level of service that those employees maybe expected or got? And so I think we're still working through some of that right now, because I think in a number of cases, they're different. But I will say that our business and HR departments are both really they're working really hard to figure it out, because it's, you know, Kara talks, she just said today, it's like we're taking care of 3 babies. I mean, you know, I never had triplets, so I'm glad I didn't. But that's kind of what it's like. It's hard.
Change.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And then the communications plan, obviously that's done. You approved that last fall. We've been talking about our communications campaign, focusing on building trust and confidence, and that newsletter, which was a part of the audit that we did, is coming back for the fall based on those recommendations. So that's all moving forward. So that's kind of where we landed. Maybe if you want to take a look at the operational plan. At MSBA, I was at one of the sessions and saw a district had this real fancy one, and I was like, I just have a spreadsheet I made in Google Sheets, and it's not. So maybe I'll have Lauren pretty it up a little bit, but, I didn't make any changes to strategic direction number 1, equitable access, representation, outcomes. This work is kind of slow. I mean, we're spending, there's like an objective 1.01 that we've been working on, which is our data's not clean. So for instance, in our behavior reporting, we had maybe people reporting the same behavior in 2 different ways. Like, I call it this, so I call it that. And so we brought a work group together, teachers primarily on that group. How are we going to define these behavior outcomes that align with the reporting we have to do to the state, so that we're all calling the same behavior, the same thing, so that when we get data at the end of the day, we know, okay, what kind of disparities actually exist. So we kind of had to step back on this one a minute. I didn't change anything in culture of trust, engagement, and belonging. We're objective 2.1, we're in great shape. Objective 2.2, we're going to work on handing that off to the wellness committee. That's really about staff well-being. And then, yeah, so I don't have any other changes in those. In the strategic direction number 3, evidence-based practices and student-centered learning, the objective that was there had to do with looking at grading practices and report card practices. And while I think that's important, I think that will come naturally as a function of the curricular changes we've made. So when we're teaching reading in a consistent way, it'll make sense to report on that learning in a consistent way. So plus I don't think it's as important of a objective, in my opinion, as fidelity around the multi-tiered systems of support.
Agree.
So that's a change for you to look at or consider. And then on the last page, strategic direction number 5, objective 5.1 was completing it. This is now about operationalizing it. We need to put it in play. And then 5.3, it was similar except about this plan, getting that done. And now it's about updating it and sharing it. So that was a change I'm recommending. 6.1 talked about fiscal year 24, and to make it just more relevant to the year we're in, I changed that language or recommending that. 6.2, the language there wasn't very specific about what does that mean to talk about financial stability. That was the word we used, and I thought it'd be good just to talk specifically about fund balance and the board policy. And then 6.3 was about initiating negotiations. Remember, if you rewind back to the beginning, it was about we got to get to the table fast so that we can get contracts done and put ourselves in a position for our referendum strategy. So that wasn't relevant anymore. And I thought this made sense to align this about, kind of connects to our communication goal, obviously, but or objective. But so that's not looking for action tonight. This eventually will come to you for action to update it, but I wanted to share that with you before we talk about goals for 24, 25. Any comments on that?
That's good.
I have a question, Matt.
Yep.
So on the communications plan, who is doing most of that, or several people?
So it's a team of people, really. Julie has picked up a part of the work. I picked up a part of the work. We shifted, kind of made a personnel change in community ed. So Lauren still is in the same number of hours position, but really more focused on activities outside of the community ed booklet or catalog. So she's involved in community ed communications for sure, but also helping with district-wide communication efforts. And then Melanie DeBay also picking up a lot of that. So they kind of have gone a bunch of directions, and we meet, as a group with Colin from Mounds View still. He's still helping us kind of, keep things moving. And he's good at throwing things out there and saying, I can help with this if you need to. And then we talk about, do we need that or can we do that internally? So like the newsletter is a great example. He said, I have somebody that can put that completely together for you if you want. I can have a shell given to you if you want, and you fill it in, or you can do the whole thing and just keep me posted. And so we talked about what the best way, most, cost-effective way, who has capacity. So Lauren's going to take that and kind of organize that and do that. But it's kind of a,
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. So on what I'm showing here, you'll see number one, this is what I was talking about with Pat. They're talking more generally really about student achievement, because part of how I want to measure that or show you data around that is in those benchmark assessments, not just MCA results. So when you're seeing data from Ryan come back or Jen come back, a lot of times it's in those, FastBridge or STAR or some of those other benchmarking assessments. And so that's how I framed that up. Any comments about that or questions or changes, or throw it out and do
That
something
looks good to
different?
me. I like it.
Agreed.
Well, Matt, back to my question about, we talk about 6% in our 23-24. How do we transition to where we're going now and communicate with the public? As I said in the past, the public is always stuck on numbers, right? We're only 30% of our kids this and 70% of our kids that.
Yeah.
And we talked about a goal of 6% gain in math. We didn't attain that, but we're going to make a shift. And I don't want to be conspiracy theorist here, but how can we not?
Sure, right.
You know what I'm saying? What's our response to that? And here's the why we're transitioning to this.
Yeah, they'll still be talking about numerical MCA data at the building level. Because really, if you look at, let's just look at building by building. 6% gain in Cohasset is more difficult than a 6% gain in another building. Why? Because they're already achieving 10% higher. So this, that curve, that achievement curve it's logarithmic, it's not linear. So that it gets harder the part. So talking about it at Cohasset, a 3% gain might be more relevant to them and more, aggressive but attainable than that might be at East or West or Cohasset or the middle school. So it'll still be happening at the building level. We're still, we still are talking about student achievement. We're just measuring it in a variety of ways and focusing more on process because we've kind of squeezed as much out of, where we're at, what we're doing now as we can. Yeah.
I would just add to that. I think it's important that we talk more with the community, if you will, on our benchmarks that we're looking at as the year goes on.
Yep.
Right. Versus just waiting for the MCA, because it's always around the MCAs, right? And we lose sight of the rest of that. So I think we need to be more intentional of putting that information out.
I think getting quarterly benchmark reports is going to be a
That's
big
why,
deal.
that's why I think talking about them at the board meeting after those windows is going to be key. 2, in our belonging wedge or belonging strategic direction, I put identify opportunities to improve the employee experience. We did some work, our wellness committee did some work this year there. And I'm either looking to that group or maybe the labor management committee to pick that work up. We talked at our wellness committee meeting last week about identifying some sort of a measurement tool. I took a look at like Northfield, they have a employee satisfaction survey that they give. There's pluses and minuses to all those. But I think that it would be and this kind of ties back to that mental health,
Mhm.
policy that you talked about, David. Just as a way to identify that that's important and identify some opportunities that exist there. Thoughts or comments on that? Three, we talked about previously, but it's a big, now we're talking more specifically about the READ Act, wit and wisdom. And so that's a really important thing for the board to support. One of the things, back to resources and time, we have a staff person who is a trainer for wit and wisdom. They have a full-time job here. In a ideal situation, I would like to release that person from their job and have them entirely be focused on implementing this curriculum, because it's one of the things that, it says a practical matter that's challenging. Wit and wisdom was designed to be taught during a kind of an extended period of time, like a 90-minute literacy block.
Mhm.
We don't have that at the middle school, for instance. We have 45-minute class periods. But what does that mean? Does it mean it takes 2 days to do a lesson, or do you adapt that lesson to? So those are the things that our staff person has experience talking with people about and working on. So back to, I've spoken to her and Brian and others about how do we free her up to be able to do some coaching, to be able to get in classrooms and provide some support. And if we can, the more time that I can get her with our staff, I think the better that implementation will be. If we had zero budget concerns, I'd be here saying she needs to be out of her classroom full time, just working on literacy implementation. And she had the data from her own classroom to prove that she knows what she's doing.
Man, is there any grant opportunities, any place that we could look to fund that?
I'm not aware of, but it's something that we'll look into, whether it's MDE or others. Number 5, or number 4, in terms of partnerships and collaboration, I thought about this from a little bit different perspective, and I'm curious to hear what you think. But we focused last year on external partnerships. That strategic direction also includes how well are we working internally together. And so that I can't emphasize enough the lift that the strategy team is doing. In many cases, it's work beyond, I don't know if I can say in many, it's probably all beyond people's normal, scope. And the strategy team goals, we talked about them today. We had a strategy team meeting. We refined those. I'll bring those to you when they're kind of official and rolled out. But and generally what I do, you can actually see on the bottom of this operational plan, I've generally listed like, what are the strategy team goals that we're working on in the service of this thing? Because I want everybody to know that what we're doing is all tied back to human. But it's similar things, like they're getting very specific about data walls, about wit and wisdom implementation, about effective instructional strategies. It's the things that, we've talked about at a little bit higher level here, but more specific level. So, but I think it's important to call that out. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I like that idea, Matt, but I want to continue to focus on, to be aware of other partnerships, community partnerships and so forth. I think that's a key part of our communications. So I think, yes, both.
Okay. I'll maybe add a piece to that. Okay.
Yeah, I think you can concentrate on internal versus external at different times.
Yeah.
Because one of the things we're working on right now externally is, we've had dialogue over a period of, I don't know, a year about shared coursework, things like that. We have a draft MOU that we're going to be reviewing. It's the union leaders from the ISD districts came together to talk about what would it look like if we had a consolidated memorandum around shared coursework. That would be a significant thing because it would really change the dialogue about, and the, I think, perspective and perception about that work, you know, moving from threatening to opportunities. And yeah, so anyway, that will be something that's really unheard of if we're able to get to that place, and we have to keep looking.
It actually sends a message to all the staff as well as the community that we really are in this together.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
For the betterment of the
Yeah.
group.
Yeah, that's true. So I'll add something about the external piece, because we are continuing to lean into that. 5, our strategic direction number 5 is around communication. And so getting that newsletter going, which is no small feat from a kind of human resource standpoint, but there's a cost involved to that too. And again, going back to the fact that we heard from our community, especially those that don't have kids, that newsletter was something they read. It was one of the ways they got information about us. You know, people not on social, not on the internet, don't have kids. That was how they found out about us. So, getting that going, we're not going to do, I think we previously did 4 a year. I think we've talked about doing 3. Does that sound right, Julie? And then the stakeholder meetings that we've talked about here at this level. And then 6, stewardship of resources, maintain balanced budget for fiscal 25. Again, that'll be our 3rd one in a row. And then stabilize or grow our unreserved fund balance. Anything in 5 and 6 you'd like me to add or change or dump or start over?
Let's not stabilize the budget.
Just a comment in regards to the budget and then a comment in regards to the public. Obviously, we're coming into a budget year of the state, right? And I think if we can engage the public to help us in sending a message down, not just from us as school board members and the superintendent, they always hear from us, right, about the needs. I think if we can engage the public and give them some talking points to talk to the legislators, I think it means a heck of a lot more when it's coming from constituencies, not necessarily from board, superintendent, and that. So, will the end result be the same? I don't know, but I think if we can engage the community to participate in that, I'll pay attention.
They all expect me to ask for more money. That's good. No, and I think the resolutions, or one of them at least, is a really good example, right? Like very specific, very targeted. So, all right, I'll bring this will come back to you for official approval then. I'll make that addition to number 4 there, and then you can do with that as you will.
You ready for the next item?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, resolution for MSBA delegate assembly. Looks like we have 2 of them.
Yeah, thanks. So this is something that we've had board members participate in on the delegate side, and that's great. As we look at this in terms of our role here in Grand Rapids area schools to take a lead on, there were 2 that came to mind. One of them was around the mascot, and I've had this conversation with people like, I don't want to be the mascot superintendent, and I don't think we want to be the mascot school district, but at the same time, this is a mess and it should get fixed. And there's a real cost to us, and a cost to us for doing this is going to take away, opportunities from somewhere else. That might mean I don't get my literacy person because we got to buy a new sign. That's stupid. So if you look at the first one, the mascot one, and I'll be the first to admit, like, writing these for MSB isn't something I've done a ton of, but the legislature passed a law It was terribly written. It was unclear. It lacked transparency. It was implemented incredibly inconsistently, and there was no funding. And so I kind of walked through in here, if you read through it, why I think it's a problem. Districts with the exact same name have had very different outcomes. There's no more evidence to that than the Warrior logo, which is all over the map across their state. And there's no funding, which for us, I mean, you've seen the estimate previously. It's, my estimate's up to $800,000 for 18 to make the change anywhere. And again, all you got to do is walk around a school. It's everywhere.
That's everything.
And there are districts that have it worse, if you can imagine. Their lunch chairs all say Braves on the back. I mean, it's like going to the old Ralph Engelstad Arena and seeing the Sioux everywhere. I mean, it's everywhere in some districts. So I also include the list that we got from the commissioner, which only put a gigantic exclamation point on how bad the process is. So anyway, I guess a couple things. And the back page is sort of my take on some of the inconsistency. Do you want to move forward with this? I don't know. I guess Pat and others on the committee that have been involved in the delegate, David, I know you have been. Is this something that you address and approve moving forward with that at an actual board meeting?
Actually, they changed the process this year, Matt. All resolutions have to be approved by the school boards.
Okay.
Yeah.
They were having individual school board members bringing resolutions without authority from the board, or without
Onesie-twosies.
board
Yeah.
knowledge.
Okay.
So any resolution that we want to submit forward has to be approved by the board
Okay.
before we can submit.
Yep.
So,
So then, do you want to move forward with this? How does it look? Does anybody want to, work on some language or make any edits to it?
Do we need to bring it to a board meeting for an official?
yes.
Yes.
Yes. That's
So we'll put that on the agenda for the next.
If that's something the board is interested in.
I definitely want to
I
go
mean-
forward with this.
Yeah,
I think you articulated well, Matt. I think
Yeah.
if you're on enough after that, it's not
and this lays it out well.
what the problem with the issue is.
There's only three problems: transparency, inconsistency, and cost.
They're just very significant. Yeah. Well, and my recommendation, this is the solution that I've recommended to the Commissioner of Education, to all of our local legislators. This would make sense of the decisions that have made so far. It would kind of provide a way forward. I don't know what it, I
In your
can't think of another way forward other than that.
In your conversations, did you get pushback from?
No, they're all like, oh, that does make sense. But,
Okay.
at some point, somebody has to step up and go,
Right.
you're right. I need to lead here.
Right,
And
right.
that's what I haven't gotten at all. They're unwilling, afraid, whatever the case may be, to actually step into the middle of it and lead.
I would offer one other suggestion, additional suggestion, I should say. Once we approve these, we should send these off to our local legislators and
Mhm.
said, we submitted these to our state school board association,
Sure.
and they'll be part of the state school board legislative
Sure.
agenda platform, if you will, just so that they're in the loop on it. Not that they're not already in the loop on it, but as a reminder going forward.
What about tribal leader? What about tribal leaders?
It's actually a good idea. I think I would probably,
I don't think you want to do that.
yeah.
No?
Well, we had from Leech Lake perspective, they were okay with, right?
Yep.
On it.
You'd have to send them to every,
Well, I mean, as this is laid out, it says what's the most students in the district, how to forgot how you
It-
phrased
If
it.
this were to be executed the way that I'm proposing it, we would need to have Leech Lake say, we're good to go.
And that's where I'd go. I mean, so that it doesn't
And he already did, right?
jump
Yeah,
up on them.
yep.
I don't know that we need to bring in everyone.
well, I
mean,
think
you'd want to be careful. You're not saying, here, make this decision again when
Sure.
there's no authority behind
Right,
that
that's true.
decision.
Yeah, it might be a time.
Certainly a good informational piece.
we're tied with Van and Cloquet
On the
On
line.
the line.
on the lag. So if you have them, And
Plus,
and
it's one up
then,
north. That lake,
Nut Lake or Boys Ford.
Boys Ford.
and then the one to the south, so.
All right, well, we can pause on that decision, but we'll bring this to the board meeting then.
so just a thought, if it ends up on MSB's legislative agenda, which I'm sure it probably will, and if there's legislation that's being proposed, maybe that's the time we're gonna reach out and say, we need your support.
Sure, that's a
Speak
good
to
point.
Right.
That's a good point.
Good timing.
Yeah.
What would be really interesting at that point, well, we're getting way down the road here, but our letter back from Metawakanton Sioux, the most wealthy tribe in the state, was basically this right here. They basically said, we think this should be between local tribes and the local districts. So that would be it'd be interesting to see when it, or if it plays out, where kind of those political decisions land.
So Matt, when you said, so these would go to MSBA and then they take it upon their self to do that.
Yeah, so then there's a big book
Yeah.
of all the resolutions that everybody thought they wanted to do. And the delegate assembly looks at that huge book and says, these are the ones we want to move forward with, and these are the ones we want to pitch.
So when you say you need someone to carry it forward, find that person who's going to be like, okay, yep, you're right. I'm going to do this. Is it someone within MSBA and the delegates? Or are you talking about the legislators?
It'll be, if the delegate assembly moves forward with it, it will become part of MSB's platform.
And then let's go out and find somebody to carry legislation.
And Pat and I are both delegates in the delegate assembly,
Okay,
so we would be pushing it at that phase.
okay.
And our local legislators are really frustrated with that process. So I think locally, getting support for that, I think wouldn't be difficult, but, saying you're mad about it and actually putting your name
Right.
on a bill can be two different
Right.
things too. The next one is really about something that was a bill in 2024 session, Senate File 4995 and House File 4986. So this was co-authored by House Child and Liz Lagarde, but it was bipartisan. There were Republican co-authors on that bill. It's the proposal of that bill was to take operating referendum revenue that currently goes from seasonal rec to the business levy of the state and redirects it back to the school district. So there's no increase in cost to the seasonal recreational property owner. It just redirects where the money that they're already paying goes.
Really?
Yep.
I did not realize that.
Yep. So that's all this is asking for, is that money stays where it's generated. It stays where the property is. And the bill, as it was written last spring, would have reduced the cost to taxpayers on our referendum by about 20%. So it's not, a game changer necessarily, but 80 cents is better than a dollar.
Yep.
And it could be just one more thing that helps us get closer to where we need to get. So this had quite a bit of support. I just think they ran out of field
Yeah.
last spring, and people didn't really want to get anything done when it came to the end of the day.
I think it might be good to, you've got the numbers, in District 318, this would mean,
Sure.
so that it's, to say 492 in an average school district is one thing, but,
Sure.
to speak to it personally, would be, I think, more powerful.
And there are districts around us, like Aiken, it would be like 40 some percent. They just passed the capital projects levy, so if you have any intention of going out, and the other thing is for districts like, Nashwauk, they have a $500 one on the books. It would decrease the cost of that $500 operating referendum by 30, I don't remember what it was, 32%. So those taxpayers would see a decrease. The resident taxpayers would see a decrease. So, David, are you proposing in like the
explain why this is a
Explain why
problem.
this is a problem, go into a little more detail about how it affects some districts local.
Yeah.
here? Okay,
Make it personal.
okay. Bring this one ahead too?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Good work.
Yeah, for sure. Moving on, next item on the agenda, school board meeting agenda format. Superintendent Gross.
Thanks. Two things here. The one is about structure and process. So we currently have limited our consent agenda to personnel items only. There are many other things that can go on a consent agenda. Normal and customary contracts. There's just a lot more things that could go on there. I'm not proposing that we make a change to be less forthright, but there are some things from a process standpoint that are just customary business that we could address on a consent agenda. The other thing that's not technically required is for our HR person to go down the list. I understand why that happens, but that's also not required. And so I'm just bringing that forward to hear the board's wishes around keep it the same. Let's keep doing what we've been doing. Let's make a change. If we make a change, what changes in the structure of the meeting would you like to see or none at all? It's just a question.
Well, I think that is as efficient as you can make a meeting, do it. And you can have the list still there, just not have it read off. People can go look for it. They can read it. The media, when they come, usually prints that stuff out. I don't think it's necessary to read off names.
So as a board member, we still have the right to pull something out the
Yep.
consent agenda
Yep.
for
For
discussion.
discussion, yep.
Yeah, I'm okay with more items being on the consent agenda too. I mean,
Yes.
some of the things that are just routine,
Right.
like Mindy says, don't extend the process when there's no real purpose.
Right.
And I do hear and respect what you're saying. I do like to have the names spoken aloud. I mean, these are people that have committed time and effort and energy, and they're leaving or they're coming in. To have that publicly recognized it takes seconds, but I think to me, it's important.
I would agree with you on one aspect, David, for the people that are retiring.
Yeah.
If we could, there's a little bit of recognition there.
Right.
Sure.
So if we could pull that off, and
Mhm.
as far as the people coming in, they're new to the district. I get that.
Fair point.
It's there if they want to look for it. And maybe a disclaimer that any one board member can pull anything off. the
HR could
consent
certainly
agenda,
separate those out.
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
Just so the public is aware of that
Mhm.
aspect of it.
You could have them first,
Well, sure. Yeah, recognize the.
recognize,
Mhm.
you know.
That would
However,
I don't know
That'd be
if
nicer.
it's as they come in,
Mhm.
but I think just list the retirers first and then
The only thing that I'd be concerned about is not everybody leaves under as distinguished of circumstances as everybody else, even in a retirement situation. So being able to talk about them as a group, like one of the things Pat does often is, our retirees in this group represent 120 some, we're kind of acknowledging them as a group. I'd be concerned if there were situations where, not everybody's leaving under as distinguished of circumstances.
We can work our way through that though.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's,
we can just say that they're not distinguished.
Two categories.
We'll have Ben not speak on this issue.
So in terms of clarification, I think I heard and there's consensus about adding things to the consent agenda that are appropriate to be there.
Yes.
Everybody can request for it to get pulled. I think obviously if that request can happen, you know,
Ahead of time.
and when Julie gets the agenda out so that we're not at a board meeting, something doesn't become a spectacle that doesn't really need to. So that would be my request there. And then what are we saying around the reading of names? I'm not clear on that. We're
From
gonna
the
keep doing what we've been doing, or are we gonna read, which is read everybody that comes and goes? Or are we,
I'd be more apt to the ones that are actually retiring.
I'd
and I
I'd
agree with
support.
that too.
And,
And we're acknowledging them by saying it. We're
Yeah.
not, I don't think you have to say anything else.
and I don't disagree with, they might be leaving on whatever
Yeah.
terms. They're still retiring.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's still
They still work for us.
somebody that I've worked with.
25 years, 30 years, 15 years, 10 years. We're not getting into the details of why.
Yeah, we're not,
they're
we
just
say their
retiring.
names now and we don't say details. So, I
Yeah.
mean, that's
Yeah.
years of service.
sure.
Yeah.
Casey's on, do we want to just check and see if she's got any reaction to that? Casey, are you actively monitoring the meeting or? All right, well, I'll check with her before we
Good.
do anything different.
Sure.
How's
Good.
that sound? Okay.
I'm here, Matt, sorry.
So did you hear that discussion about, you know, you reading all the names versus just the retirees?
Yeah, I caught the end of it here.
So do you have any concerns about when we're having a consent agenda that you wouldn't go necessarily and read down all the names? You might just recognize those that are retiring. Yeah, is there any concern there on your part?
I don't have any concerns, and I think most districts aren't reading them.
All right, well, we can take that step and then and see how it goes. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, the next one's kind of fun.
So let's,
Oh, sorry.
one more thing about the format here.
Yeah. Oh, wait.
We've been doing this highest student
Forgot about
achievement,
that.
safe and welcoming, effective partnerships. We've done those categories forever.
Mhm.
And I don't know if they really accurately reflect the strategic focus.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I knew there were two things and I forgot the second thing. What Mark and I talked about was aligning our agenda around these directions.
Yeah.
As opposed to the things we have.
Mhm.
So
I mean, that would tie everything together.
there's consensus around that. All right, we'll work on what that looks like. I like that idea a lot.
All right.
Well, with that, I'm just thinking back from the MSBA training on Monday that we had, we go, everything centers around student achievement. Is there a statement that we could say at the beginning of our meeting, whether that's our mission statement, which I think we all talked about, maybe wanting to change that at some point in time? About student achievement, you know, every decision we make or student achievement is at the forefront, something. I don't know what those words should be or whatever, but just
Let's, yeah. I'll think about that and see what kind of ideas we can come up with. If you come up with any, let me know, but I think that's good. Yeah, kind of like underneath the words strategic directions on here,
Right.
like that phrase right
That
there.
really could be
Yep.
like
Yeah.
the start
better
list, and then those are all under it.
Yeah. Something like that. Okay. All right. Yeah,
Next one's Big Fork mascot.
sure glad you brought that up.
I wasn't gonna go with that.
Yeah. So as much as I didn't want to be the mascot superintendent, you know, in two for
Maybe you look
two.
at that one.
Oh, I got more. Sorry. Everybody got one?
Yep.
We had a problem was identified with the Big Fork one. Let's see, Dave, you want to copy this? Big problem was identified. Heather has been working with the company that we ordered our weight materials from up there. BFS. I can't remember. Anyway, they have a graphics arts side of their business because they know they're going to sell a bunch of uniforms eventually, right? I mean,
Yep.
It's a business decision. This is the logo that they've come up with. People generally really like it. it will be ours when we adopt it, which I think is important that we do own it. And so, you know, the top two really are kind of the centerpiece, sort of like the bird that with the outstretched wings and the bird that's facing forward in Grand Rapids High School. These kind of are similar to those two. And then the bottom are more like art that they're working to choose from to represent on t-shirts and sweatshirts and, you know, logo wear, etc. I talked to Heather and Ken recently about getting some feedback from the community and kiddos and parents up there. So they're going to work on a plan for that. And, but I feel good about where this is headed. I think people, like I said, people like it when they see it. And
Is there an issue with the existing mascot?
the one that
Yukon.
the old school one is fine. It's just really outdated. Then there was a shift to the forward looking husky that really is Yukon's mascot.
Oh, okay.
And they blew the whistle on us, not in a, you know, mean way, just said, hey,
They didn't offer to give theirs up.
they didn't offer to give theirs up. And it's interesting, Chad Lovedahl at the most recent Big Fork school advisory committee, he said, I think we called way back when and asked if it was okay, and whoever it was said, yeah, no problem, go ahead and use it. But none of that's in writing, and
Yeah, it's not
you know,
recorded.
it's not
Didn't
recorded
happen.
anywhere. And you know, I think from a trademark and that type of a thing, if they don't tell us to stop, then it kind of becomes fair game everywhere, and they don't want that up. So,
Right.
so
So just a question. It seems like we're not all inclusive here because it says Big Fork High School.
yeah, I asked that question. Yeah, I asked Heather about that. So I think whether it says Big Fork School or Big Fork Elementary, or we have some that say Big Fork Elementary and Big Fork High School, kind of that piece.
Well, so how do we?
Yeah.
Big Fork School? I don't know. I just.
Yeah. So
It's
that's kind of what this is looking like. I said, hey, it would be really cool if we could get all the kids some t-shirts at the beginning of the year somehow. And, you know, we just need to find some kind of a donation. I mean, I think for less than $3,000, we could probably get some cheap t-shirts for, you know, internet ordered t-shirts made up. That would be pretty cool. So I should work on that too.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So that's kind of fun.
Last item on the agenda, school district identity.
All right, so a few meetings ago, work sessions ago, we talked about, you know, back to the communications plan, recommendations for Colin about what it is, how it is that we refer to ourselves, and, you know, the 8 or 10 different names of ours that's float out there, and none of them are used consistently. His work around recommending or when districts are in situations like ours geographically and with school arrangement, and just how important it is that we land on a name and a brand. And we talked at that meeting about some options that the most sort of, the name that would follow the most common conventions would be something like Grand Rapids Area Schools or Grand Rapids Area Public Schools. My action item out of that meeting was to talk to the Big Fork School Advisory Committee about it. So Mark was at the meeting. We talked about it. There was at that table, and I think to a person that I've brought this up with, universal agreement that having 10 names is not good.
Correct.
Everybody agrees with that.
Good.
I shared the rationale that Colin put together about, you know, when do hyphens show up and when do they not? Well, what happens if you're, you know, in districts like ours, what's predominantly seen? And so I shared Grand Rapids Area Schools is the name that we've talked about the most. I didn't ask for a vote, but I did say, what's your reaction to that? And I would say that the reaction wasn't as strong as I expected, but there were a couple that said, you know, we don't, you know, we obviously don't like that Big Fork's not in the name.
Mhm.
So I
Well,
Yeah.
one of the points that was brought up is, for example, we have Cohasset schools.
Right.
Cohasset is a significantly larger school than Big Fork.
Yep.
And, why aren't we Grand Rapids, Cohasset, Big Fork? And I think Matt said, well, how many municipalities do we have?
30.
30,
Yeah.
So,
One of the suggestions at the table was, what about Itasca area? Because one of the comments was, what's Grand Rapids area? And I said, hey, that's probably a really good idea, except Itasca area schools is already taken. It's got an ISD number and everything, 6070. So it's not, as much as that might have worked, it's not really an option. So at some point we need to proceed. We're a little bit in a no man's land right now, where I have people kind of like, what are we gonna do? Can we use any names yet? And I think at some point we need to be able to move forward. I don't think we need a big splashy campaign that says we're rebranding as this or that. We just need to be able to say we're going to start referring to ourselves as this.
Yep.
When we see the newsletter, it's going to say that. My recommendation is that we use Grand Rapids area schools, and it just move forward and get going. But it has to be something we're committed to using consistently. Otherwise, we're kind of just adding another name to the list. So I guess I am looking for some direction on when to start using something different or to land on something.
I'd absolutely support that. Itasca doesn't mean much past a 50-mile radius.
Our buses say Itasca.
They do.
Well, but people think of headwaters when they think of Itasca.
Yeah,
They're not
that's true,
thinking of
don't
Grand
they?
Rapids.
But we can start ordering them when they get buses.
We
Change
can
that.
get whatever we
I
want.
think Grand Rapids area recognizes that it's larger than a city.
what are your thoughts about the public schools or just schools?
Yeah, I think when we were kind of kicking that around, I think it was just about keeping it more concise. But I wouldn't be opposed to Grand Rapids area public schools either.
I don't think in the end it's going to change much of anything,
Mhm.
because we're going to use those on official things.
Mhm.
It still is just describing something that's overarching. It's
Mhm.
not on a daily basis going to be used all the time.
Mhm.
It's not going to be like Grand Rapids area, Grand Rapids area, Grand Rapids area. I mean, I just don't think it'll make it a lot easier for people talking about it.
Mhm.
I don't know. I think it's
Miami
Fine.
has this Grand Rapids school,
They do.
so I mean, it's there, but I,
Mindy, you brought up the deal about the foundation too, right?
What's the Grand Rapids Area Chamber of Commerce? It's the Grand Rapids Area Community Foundation. I mean, that happens a lot.
And those are
Bigger area.
larger.
Yeah.
And I understand, the comment was made, from one of the school advisory committee members that if I don't consider myself Grand Rapids area, and, when somebody asks me where Big Fork is, I say it's 40 miles north of Grand Rapids. I don't say it's 30 miles south of Little Fork or, 8 miles north of Marcel. I mean, it is the landmark. That's the reality of it. If I was trying to describe where Berta Beltrami is, I'd say, well, it's south and east of Crookston. Because there has to be some point, and people might not even know where that is. I talk about Grand Forks.
so did you have any suggestions, solutions, the Big Park Committee? I asked that because this is gonna be a kind of good subject point out there. It just is. It's all about identity.
I think the proof to that community that they're top of mind to us is how much we include them in what it is we communicate about. So if we're putting a newsletter out there, we have to make sure Big Fork shows up in there.
Right. Right.
If we're putting out something on the radio, we have to make sure Big Fork shows up in there. We have to kind of by our actions and what they see, make sure that it shows up.
Well, and the solar project is
Mhm.
Big Fork specific.
Mhm.
It's not that the school can feel slighted
Mhm.
at this point.
Which would be a great topic for the newsletter.
It would be, yeah, it's true.
But when you say District 318 or ISD 318 schools, they're still not getting the notification. You know what I mean?
Right,
Yeah.
Still not in that either.
Right.
So, I mean, if you just put out the communications, that's really just the overarching thing. It's not gonna be the main point of anything.
We've always done it this way.
I actually think it isn't gonna end up being that big of a deal. It seems like it, that we're making this conscious decision,
Mhm.
but in the end, it's just not gonna be something that stands out as much
Mhm.
as you think it would.
So let me ask this question. Do you feel we had enough of a conversation with the advisory committee to move forward? Does it warrant one or two more conversations? We threw this out there. We had some discussion after giving it some more thought. Do you have any input? Any further input on it? Take it back out in the community, get some feedback, bring it back to us.
I think if we were looking for consensus or a vote, I think it would be, but I don't believe that's what the intent was of our conversation, and I don't think that's what it should be.
They got their mascot.
And I think that if you had follow-up conversations, just saying this, we decided to do this, we're still going to emphasize Big Fork like we always have, and maybe even more so. And then do that. I just think it. One of the things.
Well, and the key is this is what we're saying we're gonna do. We have to be intentional,
Right.
make sure we're gonna do it, and,
Yep.
and not necessarily that just as tall on their shoulders matter. Mark is the
Right.
board chair, I mean, it's gotta be this
All right.
broad umbrella that everybody's underneath there. They need to be intentional on what they're doing.
I was on the Community Foundation Board long, long ago
Mhm.
when we had exactly that discussion
Oh, it
and
still goes on. Still goes on.
and settled with area because it really does say it's not Grand Rapids, it's an area.
Right.
And we had consensus at one point.
Yeah. No. So talk
Yeah, you can say that, but I know what it really means.
So, what kind of direction are we landing? Am I okay to start? You
Yep.
know, saying Grand Rapids area schools is
Yep.
sort of how we're referring to ourselves, is that,
September 1st.
all right? Okay.
I think we as board
We got
members need
consensus
to
there.
do as well.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, that's really important, for sure.
It'll be a lot easier.
Yeah. And it's gonna help as we, one of the things we're gonna be doing next is coming up with some new visual identity too. IASC just did some of this work and I think it's good. And so that'll be part of that work too, is just new visual identity.
Any other business?
So just a comment, if we're serious about changing our mission statement, maybe there's an opportunity to tie in Grand Rapids area schools, whatever.
Yeah.
Something.
Meeting's adjourned.
Yeah.
Mark?